The sky has been dark for 3 days, not the soft gray of a rainy morning, the deep, bruise-colored dark of a storm that has no intention of stopping. The river near the camp is already swollen, its banks sliding into the current. The animals that would normally move through the valley have gone still. The ground outside is a slick of mud and pooled water, and the air smells like wet clay and something older beneath it, the smell of the earth turning over. There is no roof above the fire. There is no window to look out of. The rain falls directly on every surface of your world, and every hour it doesn't stop. The options narrow. So what exactly did ancient humans do when it didn't stop raining? And what did that experience do to them? Everyone assumes the great test of prehistoric survival was the hunt, the predator, the cold, the drought. The assumption is that ancient humans spent their most defining moments in motion, stalking, fleeing, building, migrating. The truth is that some of the most consequential hours of early human life were spent doing nothing at all, waiting, wet. Rain forced ancient humans into proximity they couldn't escape. It removed the distraction of the hunt. It closed the distance between people who, out in the open landscape, might have barely spoken. And out of that forced stillness, something extraordinary happened. Here's where it gets strange. In 2017, researchers at University College London, led by Daniel Smith and Andrea Migliano, published a study in Nature Communications focused on the Agta, a Filipino hunter-gatherer population whose ancestry traces back more than 35,000 years to some of the earliest colonizers of the Philippine archipelago. The researchers found that storytelling ability was the single most valued trait in Agta camps, more prized than hunting skill, more socially rewarded than strength. Skilled storytellers were preferred as social partners, had measurably greater reproductive success, and their camps showed higher levels of cooperative behavior across the group. The study gave each camp member a small pool of resources and asked them to allocate a portion to others. Camps with better storytellers were more generous. They shared more. Not because the story told them to share, but because the story had already done the work of building the kind of trust that makes sharing feel safe. It matters where that storytelling happened. The Agta and comparable foraging societies did not tell stories during the hunt. They told them during rest, and they told them overwhelmingly at night, indoors, sheltered from the elements. When the rain fell and the landscape became unusable, the camp became the world. And in that compressed world, stories were the technology that held people together. But there's a problem with assuming this was comfortable. Prolonged rain in the Paleolithic was not a minor inconvenience. It was a genuine threat. Fire, the single most important technology in the ancient toolkit, could not survive without shelter from sustained rainfall. Wet wood will not catch. Wet tinder produces no spark. A group of humans without fire in a cold, wet night faced exposure in a way that modern people, in climate-controlled rooms, cannot fully reconstruct. Archaeologists studying early hearths have found evidence that Neanderthals at cave sites maintained fires continuously, not occasionally, but for periods so long the accumulated ash layers measured in feet. In one documented site, a hearth deposit suggests a fire burned for close to 1,000 years, generation passing flame to generation as carefully as any other inheritance. That fire had to survive rain, which means someone, in every rain event, was tasked with protecting it, covering it, feeding it bark from the driest interior of the cave, managing it the way you'd manage a third member of the group who couldn't look after themselves. Rain, in this sense, made fire social. The act of keeping warmth alive during a storm was collective, not individual. One person could not do it alone. So what happened to the body during all of this? Paleolithic humans who crowded into cave shelters during extended rain were not simply bored. They were in sustained physical contact with each other, grooming, resting against one another, touching in ways that modern humans, at least in most Western cultures, would find unusual between non-family members. This wasn't incidental. Research from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B in 2013, examined oxytocin levels in wild chimpanzees at the Budongo Forest in Uganda. Researchers Catherine Crockford and Roman Wittig found that urinary oxytocin was measurably elevated after grooming with a social bond partner, regardless of genetic relation, and that this elevation was not explained by grooming duration or direction, but specifically by the quality of the social bond itself. Humans share that hormonal architecture: touch, proximity, and the act of tending to one another. Picking through hair, attending to injuries, even simply resting side by side, produce biochemical states that reduce anxiety, suppress cortisol, and build the kind of trust that doesn't come from words alone. A rainy day in the Paleolithic was, in the most literal physiological sense, a bonding event. The storm forced the contact. The contact rewired the relationships. Everyone assumes ancient humans only marked meaning on cave walls when the weather was fine. The evidence says otherwise. Christopher Henshelwood and his colleagues at the University of the Witwatersrand first excavated Blombos Cave on the southern coast of South Africa in 1991. What they found in the sediment layers challenged the dominant timeline of human cognitive development by more than 30,000 years. Recovered from levels dated to approximately 73,000 to 75,000 years ago, roughly the Middle Stone Age, were pieces of ochre deliberately engraved with geometric cross-hatched patterns, not tools, not waste material. Objects made with controlled, repeated intention. There is no practical reason to engrave a piece of ochre in a geometric pattern. The object does not cut better. It does not grip better. It signals something, a concept, an identity, a shared symbol, that exists entirely in the mind of whoever made it and whoever received it. Henshelwood described these objects as evidence of symbolic behavior that predates anything comparable found in Europe by more than 3 decades. Where did this behavior happen? Inside a cave. On the coast. In a region where the climate, particularly during glacial periods, brought prolonged storms and extended periods of shelter. The abstract art didn't emerge in spite of the confinement. It may have emerged because of it. Idle hands in a wet cave, surrounded by other minds, reach for something to say. Here's where the thread gets darker. Not all rain was merely uncomfortable. Some of it was civilizationally catastrophic, and the human response to that scale of event has echoed further forward in time than almost any other prehistoric memory. In 1997, Columbia University geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman published evidence of a dramatic flooding event that transformed the Black Sea basin. The Black Sea had been a large freshwater lake, isolated from the Mediterranean by a natural land barrier near the present Bosporus Strait. As the last ice age ended and global sea levels rose, Ryan and Pittman found the Mediterranean eventually overtopped the barrier. The inflow was not gradual. In their reconstruction, the sea level inside the basin may have jumped by as much as 80 meters. Tens of thousands of square kilometers of coastal farmland, and the settlements on them, disappeared beneath brackish water within months to years, around 5600 BCE. People who lived on those shores would have watched their world drown in real time. The hypothesis suggests that the memory of this event, carried in oral tradition for roughly 3,000 years before writing existed, eventually became the Epic of Gilgamesh, the biblical story of Noah, and comparable flood narratives found across cultures from the ancient Near East to India to Greece. What ancient humans did when it rained, at the extreme end of that scale, was something the species apparently could not stop telling each other. The sky opened, the water came, and only a few survived to remember it. That impulse to remember, to encode catastrophe in story and pass it forward, that too is what happens when it doesn't stop raining. So step back for a moment. What does all of this actually add up to? The dominant assumption about the evolution of human consciousness, human art, human language, and human social bonding places most of the credit on the activities of motion, the hunt, the migration, the building. Rain forces a different accounting. Every time the sky closed and the world outside became unusable, ancient humans were left with only each other. No prey to track, no territory to scout, no task to complete that couldn't wait. What filled that time was not nothing. It was the slow, accumulating work of being human. The stories that taught cooperation without a single rule being written. The touch that built trust without a single word being spoken. The marks on ochre that said something no one can fully decode today. The huddled warmth of a fire that required 3 people to keep alive so that a 4th could sleep. The rain didn't interrupt human evolution. The rain was part of it. The sky outside the camp is still dark. The river is still rising. Nothing about that has changed. But somewhere in the cave, a fire is burning because someone is feeding it. Somewhere, a story is being told that will still be recognizable, in different words, in different mouths, 35,000 years from now. And the person sitting closest to the storyteller is not thinking about the rain at all. Modern life has solved the rain problem completely. Waterproof roofs, climate control, sealed windows, heated interiors where a storm is only noise. What it traded away, in solving that problem, was the forced proximity, the mandatory stillness, the hours with no task to complete, and nothing to do but turn toward each other. Ancient humans didn't wait out the rain. They became themselves inside it. 3 days of rain. No roof, no forecast, no warm room to retreat to. For our ancient ancestors, a prolonged storm wasn't a minor disruption. It was a civilizational pressure that forced firekeeping, physical proximity, and something that would eventually become storytelling, art, and the architecture of human trust. This video explores what prehistoric humans actually did when it wouldn't stop raining, and why the answer changes how we think about where human culture, language, and emotional life came from. In this video, we discuss storytelling as survival technology. A 2017 UCL study of the Agta found that skilled storytellers had greater reproductive success than even the best hunters, and camps with better storytellers shared more resources with each other. The fire problem. Maintaining fire during sustained rain required collective action across generations, and archaeological evidence suggests Neanderthal hearths burned continuously for centuries, passed from hand to hand as carefully as any other inheritance. The chemistry of forced proximity. Research from the Max Planck Institute shows that social touch triggers measurable oxytocin release in primates, building trust between non-kin, and a rainy day in the Paleolithic meant hours of exactly this kind of contact. The art that rain may have made possible, the engraved ochre pieces recovered from Blombos Cave, South Africa, dated to 73,000 to 75,000 years ago, represent the earliest known symbolic behavior in the human record, produced inside a coastal cave during a period of intense climatic variation. The flood that became a myth. Columbia University geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman proposed that a catastrophic flooding of the Black Sea around 5600 BCE may have seeded the flood narratives that eventually became the Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of Noah, and comparable traditions found across the ancient world.